Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am David and today we have a special video. Quite a while ago I did a special video interview with Dr Jason Crean where my channel members and my patrons could ask him their questions directly. It was a big Q&A session. It was very interesting and some of those people come up with very interesting topical questions that I wouldn't have thought of. So I found it very, very exciting to do. So what I thought I'd do now is it's been quite a while since I filmed that video and everyone's had a chance to watch it, so I'll give it to everyone on YouTube so you guys could benefit from it too. I will be doing these things again in the future, so if you want first-hand access to have your questions answered by various experts, including me hopefully, do look into channel memberships or patrons. I'll post info on there. But for now, let's get straight into the interview. Hi everyone, welcome to a very special bonus video for, at the moment, channel members and Patreon members, but in the future for everyone on YouTube. We are welcoming Dr. Jason Crean back to various channels and sources to talk about nutrition and answer burning questions of our channel members and Patreon members. And it's just a pleasure to have Jason back on the channel, and we want to give big thanks to everyone who asked questions because we thought they were all very, very well thought out and very interesting. So just as usual, because I know not everyone knows, even though you should by now if you watch my channel, Jason, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. My name is Jason Crean. I am a biologist. I teach at St. Xavier University here in the United States, particularly in Chicago, though I live in Florida where I have my aviaries. We use our birds here to study nutrition. And I teach animal nutrition, zoo biology, and some other courses like our high-level evolution course at the university for our majors. I've been in aviculture for, well, I just turned 50 on Monday, so let me think.
Happy belated birthday.
I got COVID the night before, so it was a great birthday.
Joys.
So it was, I was 12 and I got my first cockatiel, and then I was 12 and I got my second cockatiel, and then I had more cockatiels, and I'm sure most of you probably have experienced some similar things. And now I currently focus on breeding soft bills, particularly frugivorous birds like fruit doves from Indonesia, green arasaris, and groove-billed toucanettes from Central and South America, among other species. So
really cool.
Yeah,
lots to hear there. It's
yeah,
really interesting.
And we appreciate you being here today and sharing your wealth of knowledge with all of us as per usual.
Right, so shall we get started with our first question?
Let's go straight into it.
So I'm going to read it off of here to make sure. This question is from Julia, and it's: I love feeding my babies a raw whole food diet, but I constantly worry that I'm unintentionally leaving out something that is vital for them. So how do you think, Jason, do you make sure that a raw whole food diet is balanced nutritionally with all different vitamins and minerals available in, like, for example, the books by Common Budai? How do you balance it? How do you maintain that?
So there is no way. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't know what individual species need down to the micronutrient level, vitamins and minerals, for example. However, because our parrots are largely opportunistic omnivores, they can get these nutrients from a host of different places. So unlike feeding a carnivore like a dog, or a cat who may need a specific percentage of organ meats every day to satisfy things, parrots, you can feed a host of different things in order to satisfy those nutrients. And I think we worry way too much about fearing food and that we're not going to satisfy all of their needs, where their needs are absolutely easy to satisfy if you're offering a diverse diet. Now, that being said, there's a lot of, how do I put this? There's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to diet, because we have been taught just through pop culture that everything has a nutrition label. This is what you're supposed to get, RDA, right? Your regular daily allowance. You do not and should not focus on giving your animals every single nutrient every single day. That you will drive yourself crazy. That is not, like, we should be enjoying our birds, and this should be fun. And micromanaging diet is just, it's not necessary. So if you're offering a diverse diet, it's very easy to give them what they need. that being said, I have fed whole food diets to literally every species, bird and otherwise, for the past 20 years, and never have I seen a single, including vitamin a single deficiency or a health-related problem. And I'm feeding soaked and sprouted items. I'm giving them dry seed and tree nuts. I'm giving parrots in particular. I'm giving them fruits and veg and things like that. I think we are going to see problems if some of these myths continue to be perpetuated on social media. And I know I've talked to the two of you about these at length, ad nauseum, right? Like all fruit is sugar, so we shouldn't be feeding fruit, which absolutely is wrong, absolutely is false. The fruit and sugar is metabolized much differently than added sugar in processed pellets in the liver. And I definitely, my message has always been just relax about it, offer as diverse a diet as possible so that you know that they're getting, they're actually consuming all of the components or most of the components. And with that comes portion control, because if you give them if you give a 150-gram bird a bowl of pellets or food or whatever it is that weighs more than them, and it's always there, they're going to eat whatever they want and leave the rest. So, we need to use a little bit of common sense when it comes to feeding and, use portion control so that we know they're eating that diversity that we want them to offer. And just that's talking about physiology, nutrition-wise. But when it comes to mental enrichment, nothing beats a whole food diet. You want to give them things that they can manipulate differently, that have different tastes and textures, colors. That in and of itself, I see as 50% nutrition. 50% nutrition is how we keep them engaged. That's just yet another reason why I'm not pro processed pellet.
For sure. And I think one of the other
You first.
one of the other things that is useful is trying to educate ourselves, like what different fruits and vegetables actually contain, and being kind of aware of that, because being aware of the different vitamins and minerals and what they're in, you can kind of get to know that and balance whatever it is that you're feeding your bird, because you know that you're covering vitamin K and vitamin A and all that kind of stuff. So you
Not
can
vitamin R though.
so you could have an idea of what's actually going into your bird, and sort of educate yourself that way, because then hopefully in turn it may even make us a little bit healthier if we're understanding what's actually in food, right?
I mean, the biggest point as well, I think, from what you just said, is this whole thing where we need to see a label. We need to see like this amount of calories and this carb, this protein, this thing. I feel myself drawn towards it because people ask it so much. I'm like, I'd like to create something like that. But is it really necessary when, as you say, they are omnivorous and we can cover it through diversity, and also looking at their natural history and what they want to eat? The other thing that really struck out to me, what you said, which is something I am feeling more and more passionate about personally, is that 50% of it is mental enriching. It's enriching. It's not just about nutrition. It's about the fun of it. If you offer the same boring thing, it's like if I had to eat nothing but cereal, even if it was Cocoa Pops constantly, it would get boring. I wouldn't want to eat it anymore. Even if it's sugary, it's just no good. Why not have all sorts of things that are fun? And it's cheaper and better. So that's 100%, and it leads on to another question later on.
Yeah. And also, if you didn't know already, mental health and gut health, they're like symbiotic. Like it's very much like one feeds into the other. So I imagine it's probably going to be quite similar with birds. Obviously we don't know exactly what's going on in there, but if it's for us, it may be very well the case for birds as well. So yeah,
cool.
Nice, awesome.
So Mr. Teeny, are you ready to ask your question?
Yes, I am.
Cool, let's go for it.
Good. My name is Mr. Teeny. I have been a bird owner for only 1.5 years, so I'm quite new to this. In this time, I've been researching a lot about like keeping birds, nutrition, and so on. And I'm like really, really happy to have this opportunity. Like, thank you guys really for setting this up. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here. This is a great opportunity And thank you, Dr. Crean, for joining us and
Thank you.
dealing with our questions, I guess. What I've been thinking about, and I've been lost in my journey, is the practical side of offering a diverse diet. Like if you've got limited supplies in your country, if you've got like not so much variety in the stores, like how do you handle that? Is it better to go with like less quality food, which might not be grown organically, or do you prefer to go more diverse, or how do you think should you approach such situations?
So you said the word organic, and that always sets up a red flag for me.
Okay.
Because the word organic, no, and because it's a great question. And I think that different countries have different guidelines when it comes to what's truly organic. In the US, the organic label is horribly overused and just not true. There are still chemicals being used in products that are naturally grown, things like that. So, for those of you that have heard of Dr. Karen Becker, I have known her for 25 years. She's a wonderful friend, and she and I have talked about some of this for those 25 years. How do we better feed our animals? We were both around when pellets were a new thing, and we were like, oh yay, this is going to solve so many problems. And then years later, it's like we still have all the same problems. We're not seeing any improvements, or new problems are popping up that we didn't expect, that come with feeding processed food. At this point, and this is her take on it as well. She said we really need to focus on detox at this point and supporting the body's natural ability to metabolize and purge things from the body, because we can't continue to avoid chemicals in the environment. They're there. Some countries have been much more proactive about eliminating those from the food supply and water supply, but in reality, we really have to focus on supporting the body so that it can naturally purge these things, which can sit in the body and bioaccumulate and cause health problems later. So I would focus more on diversity. I would focus more on whatever healthy choices you can make. And there's no reason that you have to offer 75 different vegetables in a week. Like that's overkill. There's no reason for it. They can get what they need from a few leafy greens. There's obviously better quality leafy greens like watercress or cress is nutrient dense. The tougher the green, the better off it is, because fiber is one of the primary energy sources, I guess you could say, for the gut microbiome. That's going to fuel all of that gut bacteria. And like Sophie just said, that fiber that feeds the microbiome, then that microbiome fuels everything else. It's interconnected with so many systems. So I would focus more on diversity, making as better, the best choices you possibly can with what's available. And then I really push tea. I think that tea, the different teas have helped support liver health. They help support detoxification and ridding the body and flushing the body of things that we just can't avoid at this point in this world that we live in. It's frustrating, but we can do better. And when you look at the research, decades of research on tea consumption in humans, you see how beneficial it is, longevity-wise, overall health-wise, cardiac disease, reducing cardiac disease and things like that. So there's a lot to be said for detoxification, offering birds and all of our animals teas to help support the organs that are naturally supposed to detoxify the body.
Awesome. Cool.
That's quite enlightening as well. It's quite a good response there. It's quite interesting.
Awesome. And thank you,
Yes.
Mrs. for your question.
Very interesting, yes. That's great.
Definitely.
Yeah, liver health. I mean, if you've ever seen a naked bird, like a chick, a naked parrot, it's like all liver. I've had people say, "Oh, there's something wrong with this bird," and I'm like, "No, that's its liver. Its liver is huge because it has such an important function, and so we need to keep that liver healthy." And you know, we now know that fatty liver disease isn't because they're eating only seeds or something like that. It's the sugars that are in processed foods, for example, some of the grains, like the liver turns that into fat and then it gets fatty liver disease. That's in a process called lipogenesis. So it's really, really important that we're diversifying and offering as much living food as possible. Seed and grains, dry, are okay, but soaking and sprouting them turns them into something that's just much better for inflammation, you know, to reduce inflammation in the body. You know, just add water. I often say it's a great first step to getting to eating healthier food. So
cool, amazing. Very enlightening.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Awesome. Right, let's move on to another question.
And one thing, Sophie,
yeah,
I just forgot. If you're going to offer tea, make sure it's made for birds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Decaffeination is sometimes a chemical process, and you want to make sure that if you're offering black, green, white tea, which those all come from the same plant, all other teas are naturally caffeine free, but you just want to make sure that if you're going to offer tea, you offer loose leaf so you can see the ingredients with your own two eyes, and you know, yeah.
Amazing, cool. And also with teas, obviously you can do like straight cut teas like chamomile or tulsi, but also I think it's worth being careful about where you source your avian teas from, because I think there's a bit of a trend at the moment with everyone just creating these blends and putting all this stuff together. But Jason, I'm sure you can probably attest that you can't just throw all these herbs together and expect it to do what it says.
Yeah, and yeah, there's some who are throwing a bunch of pretty stuff into a bag and saying, "Here, give this to your birds," where there are herbs and things like that like licorice root, you should not be drinking in quantities because it can actually lead to what feels like a heart attack. It's a stimulant. And so, you know, if I use licorice root because it has huge benefits, but you have to be very, very careful about amounts and when you blend. And that's why I formulated in the UK, in Europe, I formulated the ones for Polly's, Carmen, and then I formulated the ones that we sell here in the US, so in Canada.
Lovely, awesome. Cool, right, let's launch into another question. This is from Nicola. How to improve the diet of a seed addicted bird in their golden years, possibly with arthritis, trying to get a balance of healthy diet without causing undue stress in their older age. Are there any dietary suggestions for age-related health in pet birds?
So omega-3 fatty acids are always going to be really critical when it comes to reducing inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids are also one of the hardest fats to get into the diet because they're not commonly found in bird seeds. They're found in hemp seed, chia seed, flax, and then tree nuts like walnuts are probably your top. Walnuts probably the top nut when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids. There are oils that you can purchase that you can easily add to the diet, or you know, when you're having interactive time with your bird, give them a few drops with a dropper or something along those lines. But those oils have to be purchased from a refrigerated section at your local health food store. They need to be in a brown plastic or tinted glass bottle. They need to be used within weeks and need to be kept in a refrigerator. And you should never buy oils just off of a shelf at your local grocer. Omega-3 fatty acids are extremely sensitive. You can't shake the bottle because they'll denature. You can't expose them to light or heat of any kind, which is why they're not found in pellets, even though some pellet companies have put, now with omega-3s, they're not in there anymore. By the time you buy that food, they are not in there anymore. But if you look at an omega-3 fat angrily, I think it falls apart. I mean, that's how sensitive they are. They're just really, really sensitive. So omega-3 fatty acids, though, are one of the biggest things that we lack in diets, including us as humans. Humans tend to get omega-3 fatty acids more efficiently from animal products like fish, krill, things like that. Our bodies tend to assimilate that much better than from plant sources. Parrots, on the other hand, they tend to prefer the plant sources. So flaxseed, hemp seed, walnuts, pecans, pine nuts, things like that. What's beautiful is they don't need a lot to be healthy. So I have a black palm cockatoo as one of my pets. He needs 5 or 6 nuts a day. He has a high nut need. That's just the nature of that species. But for most birds, a walnut a day keeps the doctor away. So I tend to just recommend, going with the whole food source over an oil. It's definitely beneficial. But that being said, back to the question, any living food, any fresh food is going to help reduce inflammation, like arthritis. So there are, soaked and sprouted items are very beneficial. Fruit and veg are very beneficial. It's the living food that's going to help reduce the inflammation, but most definitely, healthy fats. No bird should be on a low-fat diet. They need healthy fats in their diet.
Definitely, and there's this huge kind of misconception out there that parrots, this fear of fat. I mean, we've spoken about it in various videos before, like the F word, and it's terrible. Again, I've seen other YouTubers say, like, for example, with Amazons, because they're prone to obesity, don't give them any nuts, don't give them any seeds. It's terrible. It's like, no, that's terrible. They should be getting some, but it's all about, as you mentioned already, like portion control and things like that, which is important. But a little bit of everything that's bird safe is going to be beneficial, isn't it?
It's just being commonsensical about it. We all need the elements to survive. Every living creature needs these key elements. You need a bit of fat, you need a bit of protein, you need a bit of carbs. It's just different proportions. But just because they need maybe a smaller proportion doesn't mean you should cut out their diet entirely. They still need some. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, how are they going to function?
Definitely.
Yeah, it's the extremity of the opinions. And common sense isn't a flower that grows in everyone's garden, right? Like you just have to hop on social media and you can see that in seconds. But when it comes to fat, fat doesn't make you fat. I dropped 85 pounds in 10 months, and because I increased the fat in my diet and lowered the carbs. So lowered the sugars, increased the fats and the proteins, and never felt better. All my inflammation was gone, autoimmune, it just goes away, because your body's like, finally, I have some, healthy fuel in the form of fats. And birds have the highest metabolic rate of almost all animals. And that includes them just sitting in a cage all day. Their heart hums because their metabolism is so fast. So they don't need to be flying miles and miles every day to require fat. And there's a big misconception that, since my bird doesn't get a lot of exercise, it shouldn't have any fat. That's just, we're made of fat. Every cell in your body, every cell in an animal's body is 2 layers of lipids, 2 layers of fats. That's what controls what goes in and out of your cells. And it's so critical that we're giving them those raw materials so that they can, be healthy and function.
Awesome. Nicola's just said thank you in the chat. So nice.
Yes.
Cool.
Do you want to do
And
this?
you should, and it doesn't hurt for you to eat a walnut or 2 a day either.
I don't really like nuts.
I do. Well, and I'm telling you, throw it on a salad or something. But just the fiber, the proteins, the minerals. There's just so much in that one little package that is beneficial for birds and for us. So.
Sure.
Can I just thank you for that answer? That's really appreciated. Fern's with me. She's 23 now, so she's getting on. But yeah, the best way she loves walnuts, and I have to eat quite a few to get her to eat them. And it's doing both of us really good.
Good. Yeah,
Thank you.
with smaller birds like that, you know, sprouted seeds are often a gateway to better eating as well when it comes to reducing inflammation, and even things like hemp seed or hemp hearts are often, I mean, just a few bites, that's all they need, and they've got the benefits. So
She'll eat loads though, that's the problem. She'll
yeah,
eat her body
portion
weight.
control. Yeah, portion control is important. I mean, in America, I can say there's this misconception that if a little is good, a lot must be better. So people just, you know, so that's definitely a problem when you want to spoil your birds. And unfortunately, I tell people all the time, we cannot treat them like people because that does them a disservice. We need to treat them as birds because we need to respect them for what they are. And, you know, that means that we don't spoil them and reward them with food constantly because that just leads to problems. We see it in human children when we do that. So, you know, we got to make sure that we're treating them as birds, respecting them for what they are. They have different needs than we do, and that is all very valid and okay.
Fabulous. Right. Shall we move on to another question?
Yeah, so this one's kind of related to the first question as well, what we discussed there about, again, the 50%. And so what do you think is the most important factor to parrots in how they select their food? Is it vision, taste, and texture? Or, sorry, is it vision, taste, or texture?
I would say vision is probably at the top for most species. It's hard to say because we obviously haven't studied all of these species and how they see, but years ago at the Chicago Zoological Society, I attended a lecture where they were doing research there, and I was working in an adjoining lab at the time, and they were looking at different species of birds and how they responded to their conspecifics, their potential mates, who were either under UV light or not under UV light. And what they found was species who, how do I put this? Species who lived in undergrowth didn't have as much of a preference for birds under UV light versus birds who lived in canopies who did tend to choose the mate who was under UV light. Because their vision, they're so driven by UV light reflectance and how they, you know, because birds can see UV, we can't. So those were mostly South American birds, tanagers, things like that. So it depends on the species. It depends on how they've evolved and adapted to whatever habitats they live in. But based on my experience with parrots and watching what they do, vision often tends to be first. Now, when you look at the science says they don't have as many taste buds as we do. So taste is questionable, and taste is very tied to olfaction. And when you look at most birds, their olfactory bulb where they sense smell is smaller on average, right? But does that mean that they don't have a sense of smell, or their sense of smell is reduced? I don't know that people really know the answer to that. I know they study shorebirds who have a much larger olfactory bulb where they can smell, you know, they're obviously smelling. But it's hard to say. We know parrots respond to colors, and we know of the ones that we have seen in studies. So when you look at things like African greys and the Pepperberg studies, clearly they use color to identify things and categorize and classify things, right? But when it comes to a wide sweeping answer to that question, it's hard to answer. But I would say on average, it's probably vision, and then followed by taste and smell. I mean, when I brew aniseed pods, the birds know they're there without seeing them. Like like they get excited. So there's obviously something that they're sensing, but whether they have receptors to sense things like those plant-based oils, for example, maybe they're sensitive to those, so they know they're around. They know they're near. So there's a lot we don't know, but I mean, obviously birds are driven a lot by vision. And when you look at how birds court each other and try to attract mates, I mean, birds have that whole thing, that whole market cornered, right? They just know what they're doing. They respond, they see colors in each other that we can't see. You know, I think the first time I ever saw a myna bird under UV light, I was just like, wow, the world is a lie. Like this is incredible. Like how they see each other with UV light reflectance is incredible, but that also has a lot to do with what foods they pick. Are they ripe or are they not? You know, so vision has a lot of power when it comes to how birds are making their choices.
We would definitely agree with that based on what we've seen, like in various sources. Vision seems to be the primary method they identify their foods and what they pick out. I'd say texture is another important thing as well, because you notice that they manipulate things with their beaks, taste them with their tongue, especially the conures, for example, and some things will get discarded at that point. They'll just reject it. And if taste and olfaction is less of a factor, I'd say that texture is another factor they're employing there to decide if that food's viable or not. And obviously this is just based on anecdotal stuff, me observing them. But also with regards to taste, we've got a good example of taste playing a very important role. When we have fresh apple juice, for example, our conures can sense that and they will fly across the room to get a small even sample of that stuff. So we have to be very careful how often that we drink it around them, because if we don't, we're going to share it whether we like it or not.
I mean, it is safe. It's not like weird apple juice. It's
yeah,
you know,
safe
it's
stuff.
safe apple juice, but they would just drink it all day long. But there was a slide on our nutritional enrichment course where we showed bananas under UV light. And while, you know, obviously ripe and unripe bananas look somewhat different to us, you know, some are yellow and some are green, but under UV light, the ripe ones are just glowing bright blue. And again, that may even tie into diet conversion and whether your bird wants to try new things because maybe they don't like how it looks in their, you know, visual profile. So there's a lot to consider there.
It's something I find endlessly fascinating. It's one of the most interesting things I think I find in the aspect of nutrition and parrots, how they select their food and what makes them motivated to eat certain things, you know, what is going on there. And also, sorry, I'm sort of taking over a little bit now. The other thing that cropped up recently, and I think this was on Discord, and I found it a very interesting discussion, and it was on a live stream, was familiarity. For example, what birds are weaned onto. Again, this could be anecdotal because I haven't like sampled enough people, talked to enough people, but when a parrot's weaned onto vegetables, fresh products, they're more likely to eat it later on. If they're weaned onto millet, that becomes like their primary amazing food and they want that all the time. So it's maybe how they experience things in their developmental stage that influences how hard or easy it is to get them to try things later on as well.
Like human children, I mean, you see kids just throwing absolute tantrums out in public because they won't eat what, you know, they're being fed. And and what we typically do is we just want to shut them up, so we feed them whatever they want. And it's like, no, don't do that. So like, you know, and I don't want to say tough love, but exposing birds to these healthier foods and not indulging them, they will not stop loving you if you don't give them a piece of your chicken. You know, like they'll be okay, but they do not need meat. They don't need it. It's not part of their diet. They don't need it. When it comes down to, you know, these birds eating animal products in the wild, it's bugs. They eat bugs. They eat larvae and things like that directly from tree bark, like we've seen them do at cockatoos, macaws, all like they all do this at some point. But when it comes to, you know, indulging, like they need to be exposed to these things. But I would say even further back before weaning, when we hand rear birds, they never get straight formula. They always get omega-3 fatty acids supplemented in the formula. They get different types of whole foods that are mixed into the formula. And we have side-by-side pictures of birds from the same parents who have been supplemented with healthier foods during hand feeding versus not. And it's night and day. It's absolutely incredible how the skin and feather quality is just outstanding. They're better weight. And I guarantee one of the things that we're looking to do research-wise is look at their microbiome and see how diversified one is over the other. And I guarantee that they have a much more diversified microbiome if they're getting whole food supplementation. So yeah, and that in and of itself is then helping the development of the nervous system and the brain, which if they're not getting omega-3 fatty acids early on, you're going to have problems. And then we wonder why we have so many birds that self-mutilate and pluck and have all kinds of, immune system issues and autoimmune issues. We're not setting them up for success early on. So they definitely need those healthy fats from day one.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting topic, to be honest.
Nice. The next question is a quick one. Is the herb lovage considered safe for parrots, and the regularity of how it should be fed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be any different than feeding most of the herbs. A lot of the herbs are going to have the same components. Lavage and has a lot of similarities with oregano, for example, where it's going to have those flavonoids, those plant pigments and things like that serve as antioxidants. When it comes to herbs, I mean, when it comes to anything, any individual food item, they shouldn't be getting too much of any one thing, because no matter how healthy an item is, too much is bad. So if you're diversifying the diet and you're working on portion control, they'll be getting as much as they should be getting, right? So there is no, like, you can only offer 0.2 grams of this a day. Like, there's no such thing. Those are all imaginary recommendations. But if you're offering a diverse diet and you're working on portion control, there's no way your bird's going to get too much of any one thing in the diet. So you don't have to worry too much about that. But when it comes to herbs, really all of the herbs are okay. Some are probably a little bit better than others, but I'm a big fan of the aromatic herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano. They have huge benefits when it comes to antioxidants. They have huge benefits as far as antimicrobial, reducing candida, yeast infections. We use that. There's a reason we use all of those herbs when we're hand feeding chicks, because they have just huge benefits for digestion, for antimicrobial, for enhancing the microbiome, things like that. So
awesome, cool. We were just quickly peeking at the chat because I know guys.
Yeah, Guy, don't worry. I've got your question here, and we'll be asking it next. It's just I did sort of confirm it, so don't worry. It's not been forgotten at all.
And we can revisit the questions in the chat at the end too. Yeah. It's not a problem.
So
this is Guy's question. So it's talking about the digestive systems and restorative approach to diet. I recently learned about the endocannabinoid system. Do you think daily intake of superfoods like hemp or herbal teas can be beneficial for restorative health, assuming birds they have the receptors for it? What is more effective at supporting and recovering birds, their system, the endocannabinoid system, hemp oil versus hemp seed? Any other superfoods that are rich in these elements that are good for even restorative health?
I think we've kind of covered a few of these points already.
Yeah, omega-3 was a big one, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you're offering hemp seed or even hemp seed oil, like the benefits there are truly the healthy fats, and that's what you should be focused on. The endocannabinoid system is not well understood in humans. It's definitely not well understood in birds. There was research done last year that was published in the Royal Society and from Czech Republic, and they found that parrots that were studied are lacking an entire receptor compared to other birds like zebra finches. So through evolution, it looks like the parrots have lost that gene, one of those genes for that receptor. And so they're obviously, it's not affecting them, but that does open them up to more neuroinflammation, which is probably why parrots are more susceptible to avian ganglionitis, which leads to bornavirus infections, PDD, all of the acronyms that go along with that disorder, versus, you know, finches who don't seem to have that issue. So not a lot is known about it, but they did publish a paper, I think it was the end of last year, by the Royal Society, where the parrots they studied lost that entire receptor. So
Awesome.
I think you had the next question to cover, didn't you?
Yeah. I will hopefully, Guy, that answered your question. Again, we'll kind of peek at the chat and stuff after you've done all of the written questions. So the next one is from Ellen, which came in today. So you haven't been prepared for it, Jason, but it's a simple question. I think you'll probably have some good answers for it. Why do birds sometimes change their food preferences? We always recommend doing a regular treat hierarchy test with birds to kind of determine what their favorite treats are, that kind of thing. But if a bird's preferences change, why could that be? Is it seasonal? Is it hormonal? Is it physical? Is it just that parrots are like humans and get fussy and have personal preference changes? You know, is there anything in your experience that can determine why a bird may change its taste preferences?
the answer is yes. It could be any of those things. Birds, animals in general, their nutritional needs can change without us knowing. And which is yet another reason why I push for a diverse whole food diet, because then we're bound to give them the choices they need at that present time. But I would say, you know, I keep birds, most of my birds are outdoors all year round. They acclimatize beautifully to our winters here, which are fairly mild. But you can see the changes in their food, you know, their food choices. So they'll start eating, you know, some of the birds will eat a lot more fat, a lot more fatty seeds. Those will start disappearing very quickly when it starts getting cooler out. So they're obviously making choices based on that, but they recognize all of those things as food because they've been exposed to them and they have access to those throughout the year. So if they change their preferences, boy, if you can get an answer to that question, you win the Nobel Prize, because we don't know. Like, you know, there's just so much there, and there's so many reasons why birds can change their behavior. There's so many environmental triggers that we take for granted, we ignore, we don't even realize are there, that can then trigger a change in your birds. My aunt had an Amazon parrot, and she got a new clock, and the bird just completely changed its behavior, and they didn't know why. But at the top of every hour, when the minute hand struck 12, it made a noise, and the bird just pinned every time. It didn't like that noise for some reason. She got rid of the clock, behavior completely stopped. It was like her old bird was back again. But who knew that one little trigger, and she would have probably not even noticed it unless she was spending time with the bird and saw the patterns, you know, over time. So yeah, who knows? Who knows why they make the choices that they do it sometimes.
I mean, because they're so smart, there's so many things that can impact their behaviors and the way they act for things, and a lot of things we miss. You know, it's why we always push for like observation lots, you know, filming sessions, watching your birds, seeing what they react to, what sort of stimulates different reactions. It just helps you so much, because a lot of people want an active solution to things. Like, my bird bites me, so I want an immediate solution to that. And there are practical applications for that example, because it's a very common one. But sometimes the solution could be something as simple as there's a clock somewhere in that room and it's causing that bird stress, and that's why it's biting where it wasn't before. And it's so important to eliminate those as well.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to build up like a really sort of confident bird and get them used to change so they're not neophobic. And just get them accustomed to things changing in their environment. And I also wonder if like the actual quality of food will have an impact in, you know, potentially their, you know, what they're tasting or what they're seeing. You know, we had a bit of a political thing going on in the UK. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to say it by name. Something happened in the UK, and then a lot of our produce ended, well, at least in our area anyway, ended up being really low quality. And I imagine for some parrots, you know, having lesser quality or different types of things may actually make them less desirable. So I wonder if sometimes it is literally the quality of what you're buying sometimes, or the crop or whatever it may be, that's actually impacting whether a bird wants it or not.
Yeah, I mean, the food quality, they can pick up on things like that. That's why I'm a very big proponent of growing microgreens or just a little herb garden on your windowsill, because like I said, your birds don't need a lot of that stuff. They just don't. They need very little to see the benefits. And you can grow, even if you have the brownest thumb, you can grow things pretty easily and give your bird the freshest food possible, especially because microgreens, you know, you have within a week. They don't take a lot of work or effort. And they're also more nutrient dense than the adult version of that plant. So a kale microgreen, they're going to get so much out of a few bites versus offering them a whole leaf of kale. So, you know, those are just easy things for us to do to be able to increase that diversity in the diet.
Cool. And
another thing, birds are prey animals, right?
Yeah.
Prey animals, so they're constantly on the watch, even in our homes where they don't have to deal with predators. And you know, I hear people say, "Oh, I wish my birds could be free and fly around." Like the wild is a really terrible place. Like it's not this paradise where they get to fly free and oh, it's just wonderful. They're constantly under you know scrutiny by predators. They're constantly infected with parasites. They're eating nutrient poor foods that they're surviving on. But instead of survival, when we have them, we can actually make them thrive. We can go from surviving to thriving. And that's not hard to do because we have so many things, regardless of where we are, to make their lives better.
Nice. Awesome. I think
that covers the last of our sort of pre asked questions, I guess, pre-provided questions. So we got, so the chat has been reasonably active to see if there's anything in there that people would like to.
I can't do the chat and talk at once. I'm a bit of a technical.
No worries.
So if anybody has any quick fire burning questions, now is the time before we wrap things up, and then we're gonna zip through. And
so there were some questions about soaking nuts, and yes, taking walnuts, pecans, whatever the nut may be, out of the shell and soaking it in just cool, clean water overnight can enhance its nutrition, enhance its digestion by up to 200% is the last numbers I saw. So people that people that have meat allergies, for example, who are looking for proteins, often will use nuts as bases for foods, and soaking the nuts and then ingesting them gives you a lot more protein. There's a lot more mineral availability, things like that. So just soaking them overnight out of the shell and then rinsing them and feeding them is very, very beneficial.
Awesome. And are there any nuts that can't be soaked? Obviously, we don't talk about peanuts. We don't want to know about peanuts. They're not even a nut.
Yeah, peanuts are not nuts, and they're just
but is there any that you wouldn't soak?
Yeah. I mean, there's the nuts that I recommend are walnuts, pecans, filberts, which are hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, and pine nuts, and those can all be soaked and fed. I don't recommend a lot of almonds, mainly because they don't have any omega-3 fatty acids. So their nutrient profile, it's not that your bird can't have a walnut here and there, but they definitely should not be the nuts that you're feeding on a regular basis. And some other nuts need, they require heating and processing. So it's just better to focus on the nuts where you will get omega-3 fatty acids and those beneficial nutrients, which are the ones I listed.
There was another comment about teas that we mentioned, and should you or shouldn't you buy tea blends from like natural health stores and things like that?
I mean, if you know your source and you trust your source, but keeping in mind that you get more benefits if you're buying a blended tea that has been formulated by someone who knows what they're doing. You're not going to get that at a natural health food store. So something like chamomile tea is fine. Like, that's fine. But just offering chamomile by itself, I have found, is not as effective as blending that with other items that then give them, you get more bang for your buck. So when it comes to chamomile, I almost always am looking at blending that with something like red clover, blending it with lavender, things like that. But some of those have high coumarines, which are blood thinners. So you can't mix that a lot. So all of these things are beneficial, but too much can be problematic. So, it's just better to go with, with an avian tea that's been formulated specifically with them in mind.
People who know and have actually looked into it properly, rather than, as you said earlier on, just throwing it all together and being like, here you go. It's something that's easily dismissed when it comes to birds, because people just assume it's like, we'll throw something together, it's fine, it's pretty, everything individually is fine. But like you just said, some things, if the quantities not proportionally mixed, can be detrimental. So it's just, that's what we would say. Obviously, go for someone who knows what they're doing. Basically, you're going to be a lot happier and safer. Or maybe just go for things are safe, like chamomile. It may not be as effective as a blend, but at least you'll know that chamomile on its own is okay for your bird to have.
Yeah, and don't offer anything in tea bags.
We know that one.
The bags are often treated, and it's I don't drink tea from a tea bag either. So I make sure all my teas are steeped in a stainless steeper, but all of them are loose leaf, whole leaf, whole flower. I want to see what's actually in there. There was a study done a while back here in the States that looked at the contents of tea bags and found that they weren't always what they said, and you would not have known. Some of them were flavored to taste like what they claim was in the tea bag, but they're ground down to such a fine powder that you can't tell. So get whole leaf, whole flower, see what you're actually steeping.
Definitely. Cool. I don't think we've got any other questions.
I don't think there's anything else
through. Last chance, guys. If you can type quickly for any other questions. But it's been fascinating, as always, to chat to you, Jason. And there's always more to learn, isn't there?
Definitely, it's always more to learn. It's you see it with a lot of YouTube channels these days, with more all sorts of animals fields, that it is a learning process constantly. We all are learning. There's more research being done. We're learning ourselves through our own experiences, learning from each other, and it's just what's so important to keep on doing so we can improve the lives for ourselves and our birds.
Awesome. Cool. I don't think, hang on. Is rosemary safe for parrots with neurological disorders? So I know some herbs and flowers and stuff like that can interfere with medications and stuff. I think maybe that might be more of a vet question. Would you agree, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, veterinarians will, the pharmaceutical company will offer what should be avoided if there's any kind of contraindications with medications that are being offered. And usually they know if something as common as rosemary, for example, because rosemary is added to a lot of bird foods as a antifungal to keep it fresher, on the shelves longer. So none of the herbs, to my knowledge, would cause any kind of problem. I think a lot of these will probably help reduce inflammation with neurological disorders. Particularly rosemary. I think rosemary, just the smell often is calming for birds, just like lavender. I throw a handful of dried lavender flowers in the bottom of crates if we're shipping birds someplace, in the bottom of nest boxes, in the bottom of their bird cages, because just the smell of lavender is beneficial. It's calms nervous tissue, calms the nervous system. So I think the herbs definitely would be beneficial and probably not cause any issues a bird with those issues already.
Awesome, cool. Well, I think that's it for questions. Carrie has just popped in the chat to say, I'd just like to thank you for sharing your expertise. You are a breath of fresh air on avian nutrition. Carla has said, mine love lavender and rosemary, not oregano. That is apparently scary or hairy to them.
It is a little bit.
As really like that though. And Gina's saying thank you. There's lots of love coming in on the chat. We love it. So I suppose we'll kind of wrap things up.
Yep. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again so much, Jason, for joining us and answering these questions. I think it's really nice to be able to have you on to answer questions directly from patrons and channel members. Maybe we'll do it again sometime in the future if you're willing, because it's always fun to have you on the channel. But in the meantime, just wrap things up. From me, Sophie, Jason, everyone, take care and see you later.
Thanks, everybody.
So guys, that's the end of it. I hope you found it interesting and entertaining. Any comments, questions, shoot them down below. But in the meantime, from me, just me, take care and see you later.